Well, good evening. It is 7:01, and I'm Rod Schaub. I work for Frontier Extension District out of the Linden office. And tonight's Zoom meeting, we're going to discuss beef quality assurance practices. And our speaker for the evening is Dr. A.J. Tarpoff, who is our K-State beef extension veterinarian. But before we start, I would like to say, I'd like to introduce, I should say, some of my coworkers. We have with us tonight from Ottawa, we have Darren Hibden. He works out of the Ottawa office. We have Ryan Schaub here this evening. He works out of the Garnett office. And then we have Madison Maurer, who is our media and communication specialist. And she's the one that helps us get this thing on Zoom and helps us with Facebook Live and some of those kind of things. So we like to thank her for helping as well. With that, I think that kind of gets the introductions out of the way. Tonight, we'd like to have Dr. A.J. Tarpoff. He's going to join us, and he's going to talk to us tonight about beef quality assurance practices. So, A.J., it's yours.
All right. Can you hear me okay, Rod?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So tonight we're going to do something a little bit different as kind of regular Zoom meetings. Kind of putting beef quality assurance practices and principles actually into action. Obviously, we can't do that at 7 o'clock at night through Zoom, but thankfully, I do have a professionally done video that we actually conducted several months ago that in coordination with our Kansas Beef Council, we actually put this together, this whole video together. It was with the idea of continued producer education, which is exactly what we do. And this was actually filmed at the Beef Stocker Unit, where I go through step by step some of the individual principles of needle selection, proper injection sites, a little bit on cattle handling, proper administration of a lot of parasiticides. So without further ado, I'd like to kind of jump straight into that video, and I will share my screen and we will kind of kick off. If there are questions along the way, please drop them in the chat. I'll pause the video. We can discuss a few things. And as we go along, if there's other information that I would like to push forward for you, I'll go ahead and pause and kind of elaborate on some of these pieces. So I will go ahead and get started here. And we'll go ahead and begin.
Hello, I'm Dr. A.J. Tarpoff. I'm the beef extension veterinarian for Kansas State University, and I also served as one of the lead trainers for beef quality assurance in the state of Kansas. Today, here we are, Chute side at Kansas State's Beef Stocker Unit to really go over BQA principles and integrating those BQA principles into practice on any given operation, whether it be a feedlot, a backgrounding operation such as this, or on the cow-calf side. And today, before we will process some cattle. We will bring them and show some of the implementation of low-stress cattle handling principles. But we really want to focus on product selection, handling, making sure that we're utilizing the correct products appropriately before we actually have the cattle in the chute. So this is all the prep work, okay? This is chute side. This is on the back of a tailgate. This is set up to make sure that we are well prepared before we get the animals into the chute. Today, we're going to go over several aspects of beef quality assurance and the principles that are behind. So today, we are actually going to go over proper administration, handling, and storage of our animal health products. That will encompass a lot of our different syringes, needle selection and criteria, a little bit on implant and proper handling of implants and administration, as well as other tools that we would have available, for instance, external parasites and internal parasite control. To start off with, let's go ahead and start talking about storage, okay? A lot of our animal health products are actually required to be stored at certain temperatures, okay? That's when they're created, when they're actually manufactured at the pharmaceutical company, but also through transport whenever we purchase these, okay? A lot of these are our vaccines. Many of you may not know that our vaccines actually have to be stored between 35 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So even while we're chute side, it's very important to make sure that we maintain those storage temperatures prior to use. That's where I really like to use a storage cooler. Okay, the storage cooler, I've got a few bags of ice in here, but I also have all of my products that I'll be utilizing. Okay, The next I'll briefly discuss are instruments that we use on syringes. To be able to utilize syringes, and they come in, we have a lot of different options when it comes to syringes and administering vaccines to beef cattle. Okay, first of all, we have multi-dose syringes. Okay, multi-dose syringes, they're reusable. We can clean them. There's manufactured recommended rates of cleaning and disinfecting these. Okay, these are very handy and really come in handy, especially when we're going to be administering doses to multiple animals. Okay, if we have multiple animals we're going to be running through the chute, the multi-dose syringes are pretty handy. They come in varying sizes. They can be a handful of doses all the way up to 25 doses per head. Different syringes like this, we can actually take the bottle directly and mount it to the top. Those are good when we're working relatively quickly, the flow of the cattle. That way the product doesn't warm up or get exposed to too much of the sun. If you're going to be working slower, I do recommend use of some of the different type of use syringes where we don't have exposed product on the top. One of the old ones, but still tried and true, is the individual dosing syringes. Okay, one thing I'll point out that especially if you're just going to be working a handful ahead, these can really go a long way. However, many of these disposable syringes, they come in varying sizes, but one point to hit is most of our products are only 2 cc's or 5 cc doses. Okay, so with these, it's an individual dosage. You only pull up exactly what you need for that animal, and then you have to reload the syringe. If you pull up too much, if you're a little bit short or a little bit long, we can end up being short or give too much product to some of these animals. So those are basic syringes and selection of some of these syringes that we use for vaccinating beef cattle. The next question that always comes up with vaccines or product administration of any kind has to do with needle selection. There's a lot of needle sizes that are available, and I'll try to clarify a little bit on needle selection. The common gauges that you will find of needles for use in beef cattle are 14, 16, and 18 gauge needles. Okay, the 14 being the biggest bore and the 18 being a much smaller diameter bore of that needle. They also come in varying sizes and length of needle, and proper selection is critical on depending if we have to give a subcutaneous or an intramuscular IM injection. For most of our cattle that are weaning age up to mature animals for a subcutaneous injection, typically we utilize a 16 gauge needle, either a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, or a 5/8 inch needle. Okay, and these will be found here on the white needles in front of me. Other sizes that we may utilize would be 18 gauge. Okay, and again with the same varying lengths. 18 gauges we use on much smaller, thinner heighted animals. Okay, our 14 gauge needles are much larger in diameter. We typically save these needles for proper usage of very thick or very viscous animal health products. And if we're administering through very thick hided animals, the longer needles that we may utilize are maybe 1.5 inches. Okay, these are utilized for IV injections that actually go into the vein, or IM, intramuscular injections, where we will administer perpendicular. And we will go over proper administration and technique once we have animals in the chute. The next set of tools that we may utilize whenever we're processing cattle may have something to do with a growth promoting implant. Growth promoting implants are often used to help increase the feed efficiency of our animals and to decrease some of the feed resources that we have to put into these animals. Well documented about their efficacy and safety in beef cattle. Depending on the product that you utilize for an implant, you may be required to administer those implants with several different types of equipment. Okay, each of them match that particular implant. Regardless of the implant that we're going to utilize, there's a few key components to have prepared before administering these implants. And that has to do with a cleaning tray and also a sponge. Okay, as you can see here is we do have an implant tray where we can clean, disinfect the needle in between each animal. We often fill this sponge with a type of disinfectant solution that you should have on hand that is mixed with water to be able to provide that sanitation. Other tools that I like to have available chute side. Okay, nitrile gloves. Okay, we're handling a lot of different products. We'll be handling animals as well. Just for basic biosecurity and sanitation of ourselves, it is a good idea to wear gloves when we're administering animal health products. Other tools that we'll utilize are products that we may have to administer orally, whether it's a drenching gun or a bolus gun, and also some of our external parasite products or pour-ons that we'll administer down the top lines of animals. We'll discuss those techniques as well. Again, anytime that we're handling animals, we may be surprised with animals that have lost ear tags. There's a lot of different ear tags that are out there and available. Making sure that you have proper functioning ear tagging equipment that's readily and available chute side whenever we're running those animals through. Last but not least, I think it's very important on making sure that we have sharps container. Okay, we do have disposable needle uses that we will be swapping needles pretty regularly. It is very important to have proper disposal. Okay, for all the needles and that we may be utilizing, we will be requiring that we change those needles quite regularly. Okay, what's most commonly recommended is changing needle at a minimum every 10 to 15 head. Okay, however, if we do have concern on different bloodborne pathogens such as anaplasmosis or bovine leukemia virus, we may have to change these needles between each animal. Having the sharps container is critical to make sure that we are disposing of those products appropriately so we don't have any damage or danger to people handling those. This is a brief overview of the preparation chute side before we go gather cattle. What we would like to do right now is actually go gather a group of cattle that are ready for revaccination, and we will gather them using low stress cattle handling techniques and bringing them through the working facility. Out here in the yard, we're getting prepared to utilize some of our low stress cattle handling techniques to be able to pull cattle from another pen into our working and holding area, and ultimately through the facility to the chute. So that's what we're here to do, and we're going to go gather up this group of cattle. Okay, so we are on our way to go gather cattle out of a holding pen to bring them up to the working facility. And our overall goal here is to be able to give these animals direction. Cattle, if they're not responding to your movements like you think they should, the cattle don't lie to you, okay? So we want to take our time. As you can see, these 4 animals right here in front of me, I have their attention. I do have 2 more animals that are on the far side of the pen that are staring at me. I at least have one eye looking at me. So the cattle are recognizing that I'm getting ready to enter the pen. From here, I want the animals I'm trying to give them direction on which way I want them to go. Okay, so right now they're starting to react to my movement. I'm starting to get their attention. Okay, as I move, I slowly move forward. As you notice, I'm coming down the closest side of the alley. I want to be the pivot point within this pen so I can apply pressure so these cattle can go out the gate that I had opened. By applying pressure and giving directions to the lead cattle, I can reward the proper movement by retreating. When you hear folks talk about give and take of pressure, whenever they move in the direction that we want them to go, we do reward them by releasing the pressure. Now, once we get them into the alley, sometimes we have to act a little bit more like a border collie, moving from side to side to make sure that the cattle always see us with at least one of their eyes. So we want to maintain momentum going down an alley. Making sure the cattle are going in the direction we want them. Applying pressure when needed. To ultimately get to our destination. Now when we talk about flight zone, that's that area how close we need to be for those animals to respond to our movement. These girls have been handled quite a bit before, as you can see, that I can get relatively close to them before they start to react. Now we have them in the holding pen prior to going through our full working facility. From here, we empty these pens with the exact same methodology that we empty the much larger pen. Here we are in the transition zone. Okay, this is the holding area before we work cattle directly into our working facility. We've gathered these cattle from a much larger pen, and we've got them into these staging areas. And this can take every operation can have a staging area that looks a little bit different. These are sideways pens where they could be angled or just one straight alley. Regardless, this is where we gather drafts of cattle to be able to pull them through and let them go flow through our working facility. Now, a draft, that terminology is often used on what is a draft. A draft of animals is how many animals fit within our working facility at any given time. And our working facility is from our chute down our straight alley or tub, okay, of our curved alley. Whether it's a straight alley, whether it's a curved alley, doesn't matter however many animals of that given size can fit within that facility. That is the draft or the draft size that we're going to pull from these staging zones. So from here, we will pull a draft of these animals, which actually is the perfect size of about 6 head. They will flow through our working facility directly into our alley. One thing to point out is whether we have a tub, a bud box, or a turret system that is behind me, they all work very similarly, using the cattle's basic movement and flow to be able to let them flow through the system without balking or stopping. They are not holding facilities. We do not hold animals there. That's what the staging area and the staging zone is for. So from here, they will flow straight through and only stop once they're right behind the chute. Emptying this pen, I will empty this pen exactly how I emptied the much larger pen. It's just on a much smaller scale, where I can move on this adjacent side of the pen and act as the turret that the animals will move around me. Slowly, I'll have them file past. I'll apply a little bit more pressure behind them, ultimately letting them get single file with quite a bit of action going on and a little bit of moving around. They're not quite as responsive, but they've been handled quite a bit. Come on, girls. Come on. They will flow through the system. Now, once these animals have come through the working facility and have come around this modified tub, what they will do is they're going from a group into a single file into the alley directly behind our chute. Now, when we work animals down the straight alley and down the straight chute, we do have to give them direction, just like we asked for in giving them directions out in the pen. We will actually give them direction from the front. We have to tell these animals and the leader of the draft how to go through this facility and which direction to go. And that is illustrated by another team member that would be in charge of working through that straight alley. How they work that straight alley is they come from the chute, they walk past all of these animals, and the animals, the cattle, how they want to respond to that movement is actually going past them in the direction we want them to go. So we move opposite. We don't push from the back, we actually direct from the front. As our team member walks down the straight alley, gets the attention of the cattle, this is where they have to move past the animals and ultimately into the straight alley. We give them time to be able to go down the straight alley until we have enough animals within there to start working. Now, one thing that most of our handling facilities utilize are no-backs. And we can utilize these no-backs in order to hold those animals within the working facility. Now, here we are, back chute side, where we have gathered the cattle and we have them into the working facility. Before we get the first animal into the chute, now is the time that if you're utilizing a modified live viral vaccine, mixing time begins now. Now, why we didn't mix that previously is once we mix these products, they're only good and viable for about an hour. So we do want to make sure that we maintain the protection of these products from the sun, but we also want to make sure that they stay cool. But once we mix them, they definitely need to stay out of the sun and in a nice cool area until we're finished processing those animals. If you do have a larger group, make sure that we don't mix all of our vaccine for all of the animals. We need to mix as we go. So again, however many animals that you can work within that hour time frame is all you should mix each and every time. Now, the way that these work is we have a solid glass vial, and then we have a plastic water vial, okay? At the bottom of this glass vial is a cake, what we refer to. That's the active product that has to be rehydrated. What we utilize when mixing these products is what's called a transfer needle. A transfer needle is just a solid needle with a handle on it that first we need to place into the diluent. The plastic bottle, we do place it into there. The reason for that is our glass vial is actually pressurized. So it will suck all of the fluid from this bottle into the glass bottle and rehydrate the cake. So once we utilize this, we firmly push both sides. The diluent automatically refills the glass vial. Once we have mixed this, we do want to make sure that we keep good care of our transfer needle and save that for later. Folks often ask, how do we mix if all of the cake out of our vial did not quite get mixed? Realize that this is a live virus once we have diluted it with water. We want to make sure that we turn it slightly, as I'm doing right now, to make sure that we get adequate mixing, okay? After that, now we are ready to fill our syringes and get ready for the vaccination process. How I keep my vaccine guns associated with each individual vaccine, because we want to be careful not to mix vaccines, is I like to use different colored electrical tape to be able to mark my different vials. Okay, I have red and black today. Today I'm going to be using the modified live on the red labeled syringe. Whenever we fill these, keep in mind there may be a little bit of pressure still in the vial, but we will go ahead and fill these syringes and get ready for the vaccination process to begin. Once we have our syringe filled, we want to make sure that there's no air left back into the tube, and we're ready to go. Next, we do have a second type of vaccine, which is a killed product, where we do not have to mix it. But again, the same care as what we care for our modified live, we do care for our killed products. We fill these the exact same way, except they are ready to go. There is actually no mixing needed. Whenever we go to refill syringes, we need to be very careful not to contaminate any of the products that we're pulling from these vials. These vials, they are sterile, okay? To make sure that we maintain that sterile environment inside these medication vials. Every time that we go back into the bottle to refill a syringe, especially these multi-dose syringes, we need to make sure that we put a new needle on the syringe, okay? So a new needle every time we go back into the bottle. When we get contaminated product, unfortunately, what can end up happening is increased likelihood of injection site lesions, abscesses, and possibly ineffectiveness of that product, where the immune system doesn't fully respond to that vaccine or that product. So next, we're actually going to put cattle, we're going to catch them into the chute, and we're actually going to go over the vaccination process, the locations, the technique, and actually administer these two products. The next part of our segment, we're going to discuss a little bit about proper chute operation, okay? Now, behind me is a hydraulic chute. I understand not every operator utilizes a hydraulic chute for a handling facility. However, the main emphasis, it stays the same. We need proper restraint before we administer any of our animal health products. Proper use of these hydraulic chutes, making sure that we know which levers work what. But the idea is we have an animal that comes into the chute system, we slow them down with the side squeeze, and then we're able to capture their head. Simultaneously, we slow them down with the squeeze and then allow them to slow down enough where we catch the head. We don't want to allow these animals to catch their entire weight up against the head catch. Unfortunately, we can get a little bit of bruising or a little bit of damage if we don't slow them down going through that chute. Other types of chute are actually the automatic catch, where the animals will go through and they will go through the head catch and catch themselves at the same time. Again, both operations, one is automatic. These we manually actually have to close every time the animal comes through the chute. So I do have a team member that's going to be moving down the straight alley that's going to be pushing this first animal into the chute, and we'll be able to go over proper chute restraint. Starting now. Once this animal is properly restrained, as you can see with this specific chute system, we have what's called neck bars. These neck bars allow us to have an easy access injection site that is very safe for the administrator, namely me, to be able to administer these products. In between these neck bars, what we can see is the injection site location that we're after. Above the top part of the injection site is what's called the nuchal ligament. It's the large ligament that runs along the back line of the animal. Much further below, down here, we actually have the spinal column. We want to make sure that we are above the spinal column, yet below that nuchal ligament. So we have a pretty good size of about a 4-inch block that we have a proper administration on each side of this animal. When administering multiple products, it's good to try to separate these products as much as we can. If we're giving 2 products on the same side, we want to make sure that we have at least a hand's width location. So one close to each side of this bar. We want to make sure that we give them side to side, a hand's width apart. Or if we can actually administer one product on one side of the neck and the other on the other. That way we can spread those out so we don't have any mixing inadvertently underneath the skin. Now that we've gone over the proper injection site triangle, next I'm going to talk a little bit about the technique of using the one-handed administration of any type of vaccine product. The idea is to give a subcutaneous injection while not being so close to the animal with both of our hands and having a needle awfully close to our hand. For our own safety, it's often just taught to be able to do the one-handed technique. How we do this is I do have a 5/8 inch needle. I'm going to come in at a slight angle inside the injection site triangle. And at that slight angle of about a 45, I'll be able to move the tip of the needle to actually understand that once the skin starts moving around, that I'm after that subcutaneous zone just underneath the skin, but above any of the fascial layers or the muscle structure underneath. That's the zone that I'm trying to aim for whenever I do a subcutaneous injection. So now that we understand it's the one-handed technique at a slight 45-degree angle, I'll be able to move slightly the tip of the needle to feel, if I feel any resistance, I may be too deep and I might not be through the hide. So I want to make sure that the needle does flow a little bit freely, that I will have that opportunity that it is subcutaneous. Now I would like to discuss a little bit more about some of the other administration areas that we may have to utilize for some of our animal health products. These are usually external parasite control or internal parasite control. What I have here is what's referred to as a drench gun, okay, that we routinely what's called used as a white wormer. These drench guns are meant to give an oral dose to these animals. Now, often producers are kind of dread having to drench animals because they might be swinging around, or we're trying a little bit too hard to get this directly in the center of the mouth. Little tip and technique is if we just hook the side of the mouth, we can get above the teeth, and then we can give our full administration dose. Now, obviously, this is not hooked up to any product. We don't have to administer a dewormer to this girl today. However, making sure that we take our time, we get it on the inside of the lip, and that's how we can get access to the back of the mouth. We do want to make sure it goes on the inside of the teeth, above the tongue. Next, I would like to briefly go over topical application of animal health products. Topical applications would be either dewormers or fly control products, fly or lice control products that we administer in the field. A few tips that I like to really point out for producers is proper application, that we get full coverage of these topical products over these animals each time we administer them. Now, that can be easier said than done, especially with some of our newer products that are very concentrated and low dose. What I really like to do with those concentrated products is I turn my dosing gun to half the volume of what this animal actually needs. So I will administer the squeeze of the gun twice. And the reason that I do that is the label actually calls that we get product from the back of the pole all the way to the tailhead. In order to have that type of coverage from some of these low dose products, if I split the dosage in half, I can have the opportunity to go from the neck all the way down to about the withers, and then I refill the syringe and I go the rest of the way down to the tailhead. That way we truly do get full coverage on that animal to maximize the efficacy of the product that we administer. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about proper implant application. Implants do go on the flat of the ear. I do have a model ear that's right here. And there's several different locations or regions that are found on the ear itself. We have the top flat, we have the middle valley, and then we have the bottom third. We can almost split the ear into thirds. The perfect place that we should apply these and try to have our implants lay whenever we're done implanting is the middle third of the ear. So 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and the middle third, top third, middle third, bottom third. We like to save the bottom for ear tags. We don't want to get too close to the cartilage on the inside. If the head is on this side, we don't want to get too close to the cartilage, close to the head. And we don't want to be too close to the outside of the ear where while they rub, they can actually rub it out. So we want to right smack dab right in the middle of the ear. And keep in mind, depending on the application gun that you're utilizing, some of these we actually have to physically retract in order to leave the implant in the track that is created by the needle, where we would go just underneath the skin, fully insert the entire needle, and then slowly pull the trigger and pull the needle out all at the same time. That's the idea, to try to lay that in the middle third, where wherever we leave that, it's in a nice straight line. We don't have bunching, and we're not inappropriately crushing those pellets. That's how we maximize the value that we get from it, growth promoting implants. Processing. I do want to hit on a few key points of kind of critical control points, so to speak, of our handling systems themselves. And these are areas where cattle may slip, may fall, or may not have an opportunity to be able to have very good footing. One of those places is right here in front of the chute. Okay, as you can see, there is a woven rubber mat on the outside of this this handling facility and outside of the chute. The reason this is here is cattle, if they don't have very good footing, or if they're coming out of an elevated location on unsure footing, many times they'll try to jump. And as soon as they try to jump, it greatly increases the likelihood that we can have issues with that. Also, we want to make sure that regardless if we're on the dirt, we need to make sure that we don't have a big walled out hole right in front of the chute. We want a soft, padded footing for these animals to step onto, where they feel confident with every step that they're not going to slip, they're not going to jump. This is a good idea to start with. Concrete by itself, especially smooth concrete, can be pretty dangerous for cattle exiting the chute. Now, in some of those locations, woven mats like this, or even cutting out the concrete and having packed sand and also wood chips can be another alternative to make sure that we have it mounted up level with the chute, so they're not going to jump. They have steady flooring all the way out. So this is one area of emphasis, especially if you've had animals jump out of the chute, or if you see them slipping at all. We really need to upgrade the footing exiting the chute to make sure that these animals don't inadvertently slip and hurt themselves. The tips and tidbits that were shared today may seem like common sense. They are common sense, but it's always a good reminder of some of the small things that we discussed along the way can really help the bottom line of every producer. Whether that's taking care of and proper handling, storage, and administration of our vaccines, to low-stress cattle handling and working through a facility, or even upgrades of a facility on some of the key little pieces that can really make your life easier. Now, with that being said, if you're interested in more information, I highly encourage you to visit bqa.org. There's the National BQA manuals. There's a lot of great resources that are available on there. Another great resource is ksubeef.org. There's numerous extension publications as well as up-to-date information for producers that really help them with what is happening in the industry and really what impacts their bottom line. So I highly encourage you to visit both of those, and keep in mind, make sure that you have a good visit with your local veterinarian. Establishing a veterinary client-patient relationship, or VCPR, is critical within every cattle operation. Making sure that your veterinarian understands your goals, your operation, what you have to work with, the previous history of your operation, is critical to be able to set up a total herd health plan. Having those discussions with your veterinarian prior to any processing of cattle is really critical. They'll make sure that you have the proper products to administer your cattle to really get the added benefit of the investment that you're putting in your animals.
Okay, so finished up with that video, and there's a couple of quick pieces that I'd like to elaborate on a little bit. One is the vaccine cooler. If you guys noticed that we Chute side, we had a vaccine cooler. That was a kind of a fancy one that has different tops that can be pulled off. Those, if you go and purchase them, I'll be the first one to admit that they can be pretty expensive. Thankfully, we can make these relatively cheaply. Okay, some of the small igloo coolers that the top folds off. If you buy one of those, they run maybe $15 or $20. A couple of pieces of PVC pipe, 2-inch PVC pipe. You can cut them to length. Have a bore drill that you can drill a couple holes, and you can fill in the seams with maybe some spray foam or even some water weld if you have that laying around. That way you can still open it up. You can put ice packs in it, but you'd have a nice protected, cool area to be able to do that. There's information that's available out that if you're interested in making your own vaccine cooler. Some of that information Rod would have available to him that we have available from some other information that we have through K-State. So that would be the first kind of point of emphasis to keep in mind, that nothing has to be super fancy, but it does need to be functional. Okay, I understand that the facility that we work through in the hydraulic chute, the vast majority of our producers don't have that type of operation, and I understand that. But it's the principles behind that will work on every operation. So I just kind of want to re-emphasize that I hope that seeing some of the techniques, some of the injection sites, some of the handling was useful for you tonight. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, or Rod, if there's anything else you would like me to elaborate on a little bit more, I would be more than happy to.
Well, we did have one question on the chat, and it was in regards to applying medicines. He was asking about the dosages for the various products, and how do you determine the amount, and if you could touch on that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so dosages are all, so our vaccines, thankfully, they're either 2 cc or 5 cc. Okay, that's 2 milliliters or 5 milliliters. So our vaccines are relatively easy because they're the same dose for all the animals, regardless of weight, regardless of age, and those specific dosages are on the label. Okay, so there's some really important information that's on each label, but that's where we get that dosage information. Now, when it comes to other pharmaceuticals, whether it's an antimicrobial, we're treating with an antibiotic for a certain disease, whether we're injecting a dewormer or using a pour-on dewormer, just about everything else that we administer, we dose by weight. Okay, and we dose generally between 100-pound increments. Okay, so we do have to have a good understanding of what these individuals weigh, at least within that 100-pound radius, because that's how our dosages are set. Load cells within a chute system are, in my opinion, are one of the best investments that a producer can make. We can track weight, we can monitor our production, but most importantly, when we administer animal health products that are dosed by weight, we can effectively dose them to the absolute dose. So we're not wasteful and using too much, but most importantly, we don't underdose, where we can run into issues and decrease efficacy of whatever we're trying to do, whether a dewormer, treating for a disease like pneumonia or pink eye, making sure that we hit that as close as possible. So we do dose by weight. All that dosing information will be on the label of whatever animal health product that you're administering. Those are all in the label. That's one of the most critical things that we have on our label of our products. The second most important piece that we have on the label is actually the withdrawal period. Okay, even if it's a pour on, it's a fly spray, it's an oral drench, just about all of our products have what's referred to as a meat withdrawal period. Okay, and that's that period of time that we have to wait after we've administered it before that animal can enter the human food supply. One of the biggest mix-ups that I see with this is when we're working cows usually in the fall, we're preg checking, and open cows come through and we sort them off to sell. But unfortunately, they also had administered a pour-on dewormer. And many of those we may have to wait 35 or even 56 days before we can actually sell her. So those are things that to keep in mind, that be very cognizant of is the withdrawal period, and making sure that if we intend to sell some of those animals after we do something, that we would have to wait that period of time, because especially with some of our cull cows, they won't be heading back out into the country anytime soon. They would be going straight to commercial slaughter. So anyway, just a few little tidbits there. Did hopefully that covered that?
Yeah, I think it did, AJ. Hey, guys, we are a relatively small group this evening. If you have questions, let's just unmute and ask our questions to AJ. We've got him. We might as well keep him for another 10 or 15 minutes. So if anybody has questions, please unmute and ask your questions.
And everybody, it doesn't necessarily have to be about what we covered tonight. I mean, if you have any other generalized questions, anything pertaining to cattle health, I'm always happy to discuss those as well. So I know I'll be on again next week. We're going to cover a little bit on anaplasma, so I'll kind of save that topic for next week. But other than that, I'd be happy to answer anything if you have any burning questions, or even just something you're curious about.
Well, I'll ask one, AJ, and this has nothing to do with what we talked about tonight. What about taking twine off of hay bales, or do we leave it on the hay bales? And have you seen issues?
Oh, yes. That is a fantastic question. And I have seen some obscene issues when it comes to either baling wrap or baling string. It's amazing what cattle will consume. Okay. Cattle, when they feed, they don't think about chewing. Okay. Especially our larger cows, they eat and then they just continue eating. So if they get a piece of baling twine, they will eat the entire length of that baling twine. And unfortunately, it doesn't get digested. It gets swallowed, and then it forms this huge mat inside the rumen. So it just kind of sits there and floats around, causes stomach upsets and indigestion. But yes, I have seen some true blockages where the animals go off feed. We use some mineral oil, tried to treat them medically. Nothing worked. The animal actually passed, or we had to euthanize. I opened it up on necropsy, and I've seen baling twine causing the issue, which the very fine baling twine, the plastic, can actually lacerate through some of the gut lining, which is pretty rough on the inside. The baling twine actually forms these big, massive vats, big balls that it takes up surface area. It doesn't it kind of blocks the outflow of the rumen. Some of the more interesting things that I've found inside of cattle, just for different reasons, for digestive upsets, and a mop handle, or not a mop handle, but the mop head. It still had the metal piece attached to it. So I found this big web. I thought it was baling twine. Somehow this animal got a hold of a mop. The other one was snow fence. So some producers a little bit further north will use some snow fence up along the road to keep from drifting or over their fence. And actually about a 4 to 5 foot chunk of snow fence that they chewed up and swallowed, and it was still intact. But no, those we consider all of that foreign bodies. Okay, so it doesn't get digested. It doesn't get passed through the digestive tract. It does nothing but irritate the inside of the rumen. It takes up space, especially when we're talking about feed intake. Cows need to consume as much as they can during the winter to maintain condition. Well, we are shorting her because there's a foreign body that floats around and does nothing for her. So if there's one thing, if we're going through the effort to carry out these feedstuffs to feed, we want to make sure that they're eating the feed and don't inadvertently get some baling twine or anything else stuck in their rumen, because it does nothing but hurt them.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Let's don't be shy. Well, AJ, I'm not seeing anything else. You must have just covered it all.
I hope not. There's always more to cover, and there's always more to learn. I guess looking forward here, where it looks like we're going to be getting a little bit of moisture through a big chunk of the state. I'm sure many folks are kind of well into calving season right now. Kind of one thing I would like to point out as a warning here over the next couple of weeks, especially after this rain, is environmental conditions, where our cows are calving and where our older cows are, or older calves are. And when we start mixing some of this moisture and calving season and cool, cattle are grouped together, and especially this far into calving season, it can yield some pretty nasty scour concerns with neonatal diarrhea. So I kind of see that on the horizon. This is about the time that some of those issues start. We've had really dry, really kind of nice weather that I think has saved us up to this point. But remember, with calf scours, the older calves within the group, they are passing these pathogens. They're our amplifiers. So as we go further into the calving season, our risk of calf scours keeps increasing. So if there are ways that we can those later calvers that are the last third, if we can calve them out in a different location to kind of separate them from our older calves, that can be one very simple, one key strategies to help reduce the overall amount of calf scour and calf scour risk. Okay, so there's something on my mind, and I know it's coming. I see the weather and the temperature is going to drop a little bit, so it's on the horizon. Just be prepared, and some of those simple changes of cleanliness and separation can really go a long way.
AJ, you hit the nail right on the head, because it's raining here in Ottawa as we're speaking. So
well, it hasn't started here yet, but I know it's coming.
Yeah. So anyway, anybody else have any questions? If not, AJ, we'll see you next Wednesday evening. Next Wednesday, we're going to talk about anaplasmosis, and we're also going to have Cassandra Olds, and she's going to talk to us about fly control strategies for our cow herd. So that's what we'll talk about next week. And at this point, AJ, we appreciate it. We'll see you next week.
All right, well, thank you very much for everybody that tuned in this evening and watched this. Hopefully, it was helpful for you. And if you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to your local agent. They can get in touch with me, or you can. All my contact information is on ksubeef.org. That you can find all my contact if you ever have any questions. So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, AJ.